Well, hello there. Good to talk to you today. We're going to be talking about this chapter from our textbook on esoteric persuasion. And basically, the definition of esoteric, just in case you were wondering, it's intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. In other words, a variety of other less considered forms of persuasion or influence. It's just things we may be aware of, but we maybe don't think a lot about, or maybe we're not aware of them. But they're just different kind of unique ways of persuasion that we don't spend a lot of time considering. So this is going through about 7 different types of, I don't know if you'd call it off-the-wall persuasion, but just different things that are there, but we don't often consider them, spend a whole lot of time. So first is color. Color does have persuasion value, and they talk about, first of all, kind of embedded in our culture, different colors kind of symbolize or mean different things. Girls in pink, boys in blue, and you can decide what you want to think about that. Certainly patriotic colors. As I'm looking out my window now, I have our American flag draped in front of our house. Come around September, it will be replaced for a few months with the Chiefs flag. Power colors and executives. This was big back in the 80s. In fact, there was, what was it called? Color Me Beautiful? But it was just having your colors done. And I would be a fall, which means that with my skin tone, certain colors work better on me than others. Maybe you're a winter, maybe you're a spring, but falls could look good in rust colors, olives, and different things like that. And it really does make a difference when people wear the right colors. I don't know if any of you have had your colors done. Again, that was an 80s thing. Do they still do that today? I do not know. Certainly sports teams have their colors, and I have to admit, while I'm a big Chiefs fan, I'm not wild about the color of the red and the yellow. Just that red, it seems a little too yellow for me. I would like a bolder red, but that's the way it is. And my love for the Chiefs overwhelms my semi-distaste for the colors, but whatever. Jobs are categorized: white collar, blue collar, green collar, pink collar. And then certainly attitudinal associations. I don't think we see this anymore, but good guys wear white hats, bad guys wear black. And although I think there is still an association with black as being intimidating and bold, and sports teams, the textbook talks about that also, that some teams have used black uniforms to be more intimidating. Whether it really works or not, kind of may not be that big of a deal, but certainly police forces, some use black uniforms as a means of being more intimidating. Our brides in white makes sense with purity. Red, sexiness. There's black attire also goes with formality. A black tuxedo at a formal event, and then going green in our culture of that happening today. I don't know what just saved on my computer. Okay, moving on to seeing red. They just point out the different effectiveness of red. I thought the most significant one here is the issue of using red pens versus purple pens in grading papers. I've noticed I've been using red online to score papers, so students will notice it and recognize it. But should I consider a different color if red has negative connotations and can be a depressing signal? Even if it's a good grade, if it's still in red, does that take anything away from the feeling good about a grade if you present it in red? But they suggest using purple instead for graders of papers. Persuasion, and then they talk about colors and persuasion in terms of branding, that certain companies have different trademarked colors. I did look up sports uniforms, and most sports uniforms are not. I thought they were, but most of them are not. If any of them are not trademarked colors. So I thought the Chiefs had a specialized trademarked red. I never looked it up before. They don't. But anyway, there is the picture of UPS has their UPS brown. I don't know who came up with that color for their product, but they might have rethought that, in my opinion. Certainly McDonald's Golden Arches, and another one, wiffle ball bats. I don't know if you guys ever played wiffle ball. We used to play it all the time back in the 70s. And we had a league with myself and our neighbors and all this stuff. But anyway, that classic wiffle ball with the kind of striped holes on it, but that wiffle ball bat, the yellow bat, and again, it became trademarked in 2008. I never knew that. We just used the bat and loved the game. Haven't played it in decades, but anyway. So certain companies have their trademarks. Tiffany has their robin egg blue color for their boxes. Okay, then mood equation with envy, seeing red mean in anger, green with envy, depressed in blue. White is a she, I don't know, but some of those we do talk about those. And then using colors in terms of, I've thought about, I've read this as far as your room or a classroom. They've said using certain colors does affect the mood in the room, whether it actually, I've read it does impact performance in the classroom depending on what color they painted the walls, or energy level in the room, that they can calm down a room just by painting it a particular color. Primary colors are bold, pastels are more calming, warm colors, and cool colors again are more calm. And I think it was blue, painting this classroom walls blue did have a calming effect in the mood and energy level in the classroom. I don't know why that's just a repetition of what we just said. Okay, number 2 is subliminal influence. Now, years ago, this was seen to be a big thing. I remember back in the 80s, when I was in college, one of my suite mates did a report in one of his classrooms on the use of advertising using subliminal messages, and did it really work? And then the textbook now tells us that was all pretty much irrelevant. But the classic situation was James Vicari in his Drink Coke and Eat Popcorn, where he claimed that sales went up by just simply flashing very quickly those words on the screen. There would be an supposedly unconscious awareness that would influence behavior, and they would go buy the products. But then he said later on it was a hoax. So there you go. Types of subliminal messages: embedded images, as we just talked about with the Coca-Cola and popcorn. They're just flashed in 1/100th of a second. Messages that we at some level are supposedly picking up on them, but you couldn't actually say you heard them. They're too faint, or high frequencies, kind of maybe like a dog whistle, I guess. Electronically altered, backward masking, and other voice alterations. The big one that I remember hearing about, this is back in the late 70s. If you're a Beatles fan, one of their songs was Revolution 9. And if you play it backwards, now this is easier with actual records that you could play on a record player with a needle, and just with your finger, you could turn the record backwards. I guess they do that with sampling and all that stuff. But and you could actually hear it, and this phrase "Turn Me On, Dead Man" from the phrase number 9. And if you've ever heard the record, it keeps saying number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9. And if you play it backwards, "Turn Me On, Dead Man," which was a possible reference or proof or evidence that Paul McCartney had died in a car crash. That was a big rumor. And in another song, I think it's John Lennon, you supposedly can hear him saying, "I buried Paul." And again, whether that's true or not, it's getting off the track. But the whole record of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, that supposedly has several references as well. And one of the songs where it talks about somebody there was a car crash and somebody was killed and they blew their mind out in a car, supposedly is a reference to Paul McCartney dying in a car crash, and all these other references then follow up. Now again, whether that's just people filling things in, whether it is the Beatles trying to create a stir, not so much subconsciously, but people curious and buying products and buying albums just to create increased popularity for the Beatles. But anyway, that's off the track of backmasking, but there that is about Revolution number 9. So go get yourself a Beatles, the White Album, play Revolution 9 on the album backwards, and you will hear Turn Me On Dead Man. But anyway, that's a lot of stuff. Okay. Now, the thing is that there's pretty much no proof. There's no verification that all these subliminal processes work. No lasting effects of this subliminal stimuli where you're trying to be persuaded or persuade yourself. And there's all sorts of reasons why the work that has been done has not been rigorous and is of no commercial value. Okay, where are we here? Okay, so subliminal priming seems to have some value that they can identify in the laboratory, but it is difficult to actually do anything outside of the laboratory. Priming, that it's just too much effort and work, and it just doesn't seem to really work outside of the laboratory. For example, they give the example, flashing Starbucks excuse me, will not make a consumer buy that brand of coffee. So the whole thing of subliminal priming, where it just doesn't seem to work. But here's where it seems to work. Priming occurs when a word is flashed up quickly and then masked or covered up, and we seem to want to make the association between what was covered up. Then they remove the mask, and then recognition of the word seems to be quicker with those who are primed to recognize that word. But there's, did I skip one here? I'm sorry. But then they say it's also limited to that there had to be some kind of pre-existing need or drive to desire that product or need that product before even this masking or the covering up of the word will be recognized quicker. So anyway, subaudible messages. There's no proof that this, when you can't consciously, you're not aware you're hearing it, but it's too high pitched or too soft. But and so maybe you want to lose weight or build your self-esteem by listening to a message that says you are great, you are wonderful, you are beautiful, you are tall, or whatever it is. There's just no evidence that these items really work. So sorry about that if you're listening to self-esteem tapes, that they don't seem to actually work. Okay, backward masking, we kind of talked about that already. But this hiding a message and playing it backwards, there's thinking that somehow our brains are so acute they can pick up these messages and hear something forward, but then also be able to pick it up backwards, and then that would influence us in some way. But there's no proof that it does any of that. So that's all out. Neuro-linguistic processing, or NLP. This is this claim that certain words possess hypnotic power, that if you hear these words, it can influence your behavior based on certain words. And then supposedly that we all have certain senses that we are more in tune with in terms of having influence on us. Some of us are more visual, kinesthetic, auditory, olfactory, that is smelling, gustatory. Boy, I should have looked that up ahead of time. How we taste, the sense of taste in using that, and that we can pick up nonverbal cues based on our certain type of our senses, which ones we are more in tune with and acute with. And a person who looks up is relying on visual processing as if they're trying to see it in their mind. I do that when I'm trying to remember something. I will often look up, but I don't think it's because I'm necessarily visually processing, versus I'm looking horizontally, relying on the auditory. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's what the claim is. But again, no evidence that it really, this neurolinguistic processing really has any effect on our behavior. The direction we gaze is not reliable to figure anything out. And so you'll see that a lot of this is just people often either trying to make a buck or make themselves popular by coming up with something new. But NLP, they're trying to say, just basically set it aside. Okay, what about music? Background music can affect shopping pace. And the idea is, if they're playing music, if anything can make you stay in a store longer, the longer you stay in a store, the more likely you will be to spend money in the store. So whatever they can come up with to keep you in that store longer, that's great. And they say that the right kind of music, background music, can affect how long you will stay in a store. Again, consciously, unconsciously, I don't think I would ever stay in a store just because I want to hear more of the music. But if that's working, then they're going to do that. It can also, I don't know if you play music while you're doing homework, that I claim that it helps you do better homework. I don't believe that's true. I think it's more distracting than it is helpful. And a quiet room has been shown to be better for studying success. But anyway, and it can work both as a central cue and a peripheral cue. And it's certainly, we know it's used in advertising, it's used all the time. And in fact, any commercial you listen to probably has music with it somewhere. Think, for example, of the In the Eyes of an Angel, that they play with the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals at Christmas time, and they show the poor animals out in the cold, and the song makes you cry just by hearing the song. They say that there is benefit in terms of influence through the mere exposure effect, that you start to put together a jingle or a song increases liking for the stimulus. In other words, how many, if you were to sit down and write out how many jingles or that you know from commercials, that it can help you, that will influence you in remembering that product. And there used to be a phrase that I would use for church attendance, that if you could get the name of your church in people's minds, then when they have a need, they may turn to your church. And the phrase, I think I stole this from John Maxwell, the place they know is the place they will go. So if you can pass out magnets or something that they will stick on the refrigerator, and there they're seeing the name of your church day after day after day, then if they hit a family crisis or run into a problem, they're going to say, oh yeah, that church, we have their magnet on the refrigerator, I think I'm going to give them a call. But it's the same idea, that what we're aware of through multiple advertising, through songs, like A Good Neighbor, You Fill in the Blank, State Farm, we use AAA, so it doesn't work for us. Or Break Me Off a Piece of That Kit Kat Bar. We know these songs, and if we know the song, we'll think of the product, and if we think of the product, there's a more likelihood that we will buy that product. But then they do mention the one area of risk of habituation. That is something we will become desensitized to it and be bored with it and actually become annoyed with it. So will over recognition or over exposure to a song lead to annoyance or disinterest in the product itself. So there is could be a point of diminishing returns. Okay, fragrances, the way things smell. Apparently I don't smell. My nose doesn't seem to work that well. My wife can smell things that I just don't smell. But anyway, fragrance industry is selling romance in a bottle. So you're not buying perfume, you're buying romance. Fragrance functions as a peripheral cue. It's not something we objectively evaluate, but we more recognize it, and if we like the smell of it or we don't like the smell of it, would influence our behavior to possibly buy that product because we hope we're going to get the romance. We think by buying the perfume, we're buying the chance of a significant or meaningful relationship, I guess is the idea there. Studies are mixed, whether it helps or not. You have to determine based on probably more your own attitude rather than objective scientific study. But it does alter our moods, it does improve task performance, and it makes shoppers linger in stores. I might have shared this before. If I did, I apologize, but it's my favorite. Well, I have two of them actually. One is there is a cinnamon bun store down in cinnamon roll store down in San Diego at it was a new mall that had been built again back in the 80s when we lived in San Diego, and they were blowing the smell of the cinnamon rolls out into the walkways as you walked by the cinnamon roll place, and that's my favorite. But I still remember walking by and smelling that smell of cinnamon rolls. And part of it may be because my grandmother used to make amazing cinnamon rolls, and we'd go to her house and could smell the cinnamon rolls baking there. Maybe that's embedded in my mind. That's why I like cinnamon rolls so much. I like Cinnabon, but just not quite as much as that other place. And then the other one was the influence of a professor at college at Westmont who used Ralph Polo cologne. And whenever he'd walk in the room, he was often late and would come rushing in, and the smell would follow right after him. And I've ended up using the same cologne for now 40 years, believe it or not. So anyway, but again, the same with the music. If a smell can make you stay in a store longer, then the longer you stay, the more you will buy, and that's what they are after, is have you stay in that store longer. So between music and smell, they can get you to stay longer. Now, odor can mean different things: sexual attractiveness, a distance maintainer. I was hearing on the news that to help with the social distancing, one park, I think it was in Sweden, was putting out chicken manure in the park. So it's good for the park, but also the smell will keep people out of the park and diminish social closeness in the park itself. So there's a functional use of smell. A status symbol, that certain smells we relate to success. I have one beard oil that I use. I got a sampling, and one of them is called Old Money. So it smells like old dollar bills. Didn't really care for it, but I don't use that. Identity management, that is, what kind of message are we sending out by the smell? That's what, am I sending a message by using the same cologne for 40 years? Maybe. Hopefully I just think it smells good. But hopefully I'm not trying to send out a smell that says I'm really old and out of date with everything. Please like me in spite of that. But anyway, and then a cultural marker. But anyway, it just, sometimes we don't think about the cologne or perfume we put on. We just put on what we like. And do we need to take these other things into account, or do we simply say, I like what I like, I'm going to smell the way I want to smell, whether people like it or not? But then what are the consequences of making that choice? So certainly for a job interview, I would probably select something that smells, that is known to smell to make you likable versus something that everybody tells you smells horrible. I had one woman, I still remember this, came up to me and said, "Boy, I just do not like the smell of that cologne." And I still swear it today. So I liked her, but didn't necessarily have her change my opinion of that smell. But anyway, so I still stick with it. Okay, then finally, um, smell preferences are highly individualized. Idiosyncratic simply means which unique to us. We like what we like and may not necessarily like the same thing. Over-reliance on smells can produce desensitization, that people, just get used to it. And it's probably true that if we smell something over and over, we're not aware of it anymore. I think of this I have walked, when I was pastoring, I would walk in somebody's home, and sometimes it just smelled like dog or cat and cat box, and it was there, and they probably didn't notice it anymore. They're so used to it, and you kind of wonder sometimes, well, have we gotten used to the smell of our own home, and is that good or not good? Because we don't notice anymore if there's something that isn't necessarily attractive to others when they walk into our house. Do they pick it up because they're not sensitized to it, but we are? So you may need to get a fresh nose in your home sometimes. Counter conditioning, it can work against us, and certainly some people are more sensitive to smells, allergies, gag reflexes. And again, when I was pastoring, you do need to be aware of these things, that if a lot of people are bothered by the cologne you're wearing, you'd have to make a decision to change, because there are certain people there. In fact, there are churches that are fragrance-free churches that are trying to be sensitive to those unique individuals who are highly sensitive to smell, and they're trying not to turn anybody away just based on the smell of the people that they might be sitting next to. So they say, we are a fragrance-free congregation. So I don't know if you've attended one of those or not. So anyway, there's just some brief comments about different types of these unique, persuasive / influential topics. And that's it for this presentation. Thank you.